Mr. Istook, that's Nixon stuff to say, yeah, I'm not calling anybody anti-American, but the policies are anti-American. Why would she bring up the phrase anti-American if she's not calling them that?
Well, because so many other countries have benefited from things. The fact that we have not used our energy resources and developed them, for example, Russia's resurgence militarily, they've benefited to the tune of something like $600 billion a year because they've been developing their oil and gas resources and we haven't been. So, yes, that helps other countries at our expense. And, yeah, that hurts the cause of America.
So it's un-American.
It hurts America. That's the point.
Well, why do you use language? You used to have a House Committee on Un-American Activities that went out after the communists back in the early 50s, late 40s, using the term un-American. I just wonder about her language here. Well, let me ask you, do you think it's that fundamental that she's un-American and you folks who are from Oklahoma and the oil patch states are pro-American because you're pro-oil?
I think what you're doing here, Chris, is you're trying to quibble over your choice of words. You know, other people could quibble. Well, I understand, but the point is, people could quibble about your choice of words, and, you know, spend all the time about your word selection rather than upon the issues you're talking about. And the Tea Party is issue-oriented. Lines,
because let me ask you about the applause lines at all these Tea Parties. They're inevitably about freedom, about the notion of being real Americans, about American exceptionalism. These fundamental arguments with Barack Obama, they're not about the nuances of tax policy or trade policy or energy policy, which we can all argue about. They're fundamental charges against the administration as being un-American. She uses phrases like it's time to reload and then says, I'm not really talking about guns. I'm not saying he's un-American. I'm saying his policies are un-American. You don't hear this lingo. You don't hear this charged up language that she's using to turn on these crowds. You don't hear it.
Sure. Well, you know, when you talk about American exceptionalism, a lot of people disagree with the basic concept that Barack Obama seems to have about America's place in the world. Now, I may not use the term un-American. I may say that it's not in America's best interest and so forth. But again, I'm not going to quibble over the words here. The big issue, and I think you correctly pointed it out, Chris, is there is a fundamental difference in how President Obama and the liberals who are running Washington, D.C. see the role of America in the world, see the role of America in history. It's a fundamental difference between, frankly, not just the Tea Party, but I think between them and a vast number, if not the majority, of Americans.
So what is that difference?
Well, the difference is, for example, President Obama talks about, we had one of his people talking about lowering expectations. You know, the positive notion, it was presented today by Sarah Palin of the Tea Party to say that America's best days are ahead of us, and appealing to people's sense of individual involvement. You know, this report that 47% of the American people do not pay federal income taxes. Now, they'll pay into payroll taxes from which they will get something back for Medicare and Social Security, but they're not helping with national defense. They're not helping with the federal government's role in public lands or the environment. They're not helping with a lot of the country's role. And we're reaching a tipping point in America. The Tea Party is hard, I know, for the media to get its hands around because it does not originate in Washington, D.C. It's not centralized.
Okay.
It is genuine community organizing, but not bankrolled by, you know, like MoveOn.org was by George Soros.
Oh, okay, let me ask you. Joan Walsh, I think the charge there is that the poor people who don't make much money in this country aren't paying their fair share of the federal income taxes. Is that a fair shot?
No, it's not. This country is rigged for the rich. The tax code is rigged for the rich. Some of those people who don't pay taxes, Chris, are people with great tax attorneys who get them out of all their tax liability. So don't start with me about what the poor don't pay. The rich don't pay their share either. And, you know, Mr. Istook can say this isn't about words, but words are how we express our differences, our beliefs. We discuss policy with words. The choice of un-American is a typical Sarah Palin divisive thing to say. The idea that Barack Obama is un-American, the idea that he does not believe in American exceptionalism is ridiculous. The idea that he thinks or has said, or anybody in his administration says or believes that our better days are behind us. This is a man who campaigned and has also run the country with a tremendous amount of optimism. Now, you can disagree about his policies. That's fine. We can have debates about taxes. But they are trying, they don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of taxes. My God, they just want to stay on, it's un-American, it's unconstitutional, they don't like the Constitution, and these are loaded words. These are words that are whipping people up with fear.
Let me ask you, Congressman, it seems to me back in 2004 when I first heard him speak, and I was taken with his speech, he talked about his story, Barack Obama. He said, only in this country is my story possible, where a guy comes in here as an immigrant. He's basically, he's not an immigrant, but his father was. He's got a mixed background. He gets to go to Harvard Law. He gets to go to Columbia. He gets to be a lawyer. He gets to be in the United States. He just talks about this country is uniquely open to people who have opportunities only here and wouldn't have them anywhere else, given their kind of background, their mixed background in his case. And he said, only in America is my story possible. He paid tribute to the uniqueness of America, to the exception which we are, where you really become in this country who you are because of what you can do, not because who your grandpop was. This country is truly exceptional that way, truly exceptional. You can make your thing here in this country. People don't ask you what you are, who you are. They say, what can you do? This is American exceptionalism. What's your notion of it, sir?
Well, Chris,
if it's not his. You're saying he's less American because he doesn't have some sort of notion of optimism.
Well, Chris, first of all, I agree with you that that story, which President Obama presented on the campaign trail, was a big part of his victory. It's a big part of why he started off with about a 70% or so approval rating when he took office. But he doesn't have that today. He doesn't have near it because it's not about how President Obama came up through the ranks in that sense. It's about how he is governing. People admire his background story. They do not admire the policies that he's pressing and imposing upon the country. Yeah. The level of national debt that we're having, the multi-trillion dollars of deficits that are having, things that are being pushed off on the next generation. And don't tell me that 47% of the American people are poor. They're not.
Right. Okay. Well, I just think that the Republicans who talk a good line about fiscal responsibility doubled the national debt under Bush, who never vetoed a spending bill.
But it's worse under Obama.
You know that.
Chris, you're right. You're right. A lot went wrong that shouldn't have too much spending under Republicans. But that is no excuse for spending far, far more. If Republicans spend too much,
let's talk about
Democrats are spending far more.
Okay. I love fighting about spending and tax policy. I want Joan to respond to something here. I think there's some very interesting language, dangerous language being used at these rallies. Here's former Governor Palin talking about the president today, talking about Alinsky. I think she likes this word. Let's go. Let's listen.
Is that what Barack Obama meant when he promised the nation that they would fundamentally transform America? He warned us with a playbook that sure seems to me like it's all Alinsky all the time. Is this what their change is all about? I want to tell them, nah, we'll keep clinging to our Constitution and our guns and religion, and you can keep the change.
John, what do you think of that? All Alinsky all the time. She's charging the person with being un-American, the President of the United States, all Alinsky all the time. I'm hearing Trotsky myself. I think this language he uses is brilliant. I think I know what she's doing. I know what she's doing. She's making a foreigner out of our president. That's what she's doing.
He's a foreigner. He consorts with radicals. You know, the funny thing is a bunch of Tea Party people last year, I think you had them on your show, Chris, talked about how they read Alinsky too, and they took principles from Alinsky. There are organizing principles that different organizers use on the right and the left. Some of them came from Alinsky. But the point is, again, we had people this week claim that the president was pursuing nuclear arms reduction in order to make us less safe on purpose. There is a consistent depiction of him as a traitor, as someone who's weakening our national defense, as someone who's spending like crazy. And I really have to ask Mr. Istook, where were you when George Bush spent the Clinton surplus and drove us into this ditch? Why no Tea Parties in 2006? Why did they start right after we elected?
I just mentioned, I agree with you that Republicans spent too much during the years we had a majority.
No Tea Party.
But we hadn't, you see, because the new expense has piled on top of the old expense. You take a plateau and you put a mountain on top of it, it makes it worse than it ever was. So the point is not that Republicans were totally responsible in spending. I'm not making any such claim. But to take it even levels of magnitude farther, to pile trillions of dollars more expense on top of what you're saying was excessive spending. That's inexcusable. He did not inherit that level of spending. Don't give me that.
He inherited a recession that was going into a depression.
And made it worse.
And he did not make it worse. Are you saying the economy is worse than it was? Please, Mr. Istook, there are facts there. Where are we going to get the $1 trillion to pay back the stimulus? Where are we going to get the money to pay back? You're going to lose that battle, buddy.
I think we should debate policy and taxes and spending and keep doing it, and the whole thing is fair game, and I love this debate. But I want to ask you, Mr. Istook, do you think that Barack Obama is less an American than, say, Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann?
No,
is he less than American?
I do not consider one, quote, more American in that sense. Now, I think that some of them have more views that are consistent with the traditional views of America, but they're all American. I agree with you.
Okay, I'm asking you. They're just okay. Great, thank you. I think you've made yourself fairly clear. Thank you, Ernest Istook. Thank you for coming on Hardball tonight.
Thanks, Chris.
You're a very articulate spokesman for your